The gleaming spires of the Galactic Academy of Sciences pierced the lavender sky of Centauri Prime, their crystalline structures refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. In her temporary quarters, Dr. Sarah Chin adjusted the environmental controls for the third time, trying to find the right balance between Earth's standard gravity and the planet's natural pull. Her muscles still ached from the adjustment period, but she refused to take the recommended stabilizers. She needed to be sharp for her first day. The mirror showed her reflection, neat black hair pulled back in a practical bun, pressed graphene weave suit designed to withstand various atmospheric conditions, and eyes that betrayed both excitement and apprehension. She was about to become the first human professor at the most prestigious xenobiology institution in the known galaxy. The corridor outside her quarters hummed with activity as various species made their way to morning lectures. A pair of Arcturian students floated past, their bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with academic anxiety. A Meridian professor, their crystalline form catching the light, nodded politely as they passed. Sarah straightened her shoulders and stepped into the stream of bodies, her measured strides carrying her toward Lecture Hall 7. Dean Thrill waited outside the hall, their multiple compound eyes reflecting Sarah's image like a kaleidoscope. Professor Chin, they chittered, mandibles clicking in what she recognized as their species' version of a formal greeting. The students await. Are you certain you wish to proceed with your unusual teaching methods? Sarah smiled, having anticipated this question. With respect, Dean Thrill, practical demonstration has been the cornerstone of human scientific advancement. These students need to understand xenobiology through more than just holo projections. The dean's exoskeleton shifted color slightly, concern, perhaps, or resignation. Very well. But please remember our safety protocols. Many of these students come from species that have evolved beyond the need for physical defense mechanisms. Inside the lecture hall, 300 pairs of eyes, or various sensory organs, turned toward Sarah. The tiered seating rose in a perfect hemisphere, accommodating everything from standard humanoid forms to gaseous beings contained in environmental bubbles. Her first class consisted of advanced xenobiology students, each considered the brightest of their respective species. Good morning, Sarah began, her voice clear and steady. I am Dr. Sarah Chin, and this is Advanced Practical Xenobiology. Before we begin, I should warn you, this class will challenge not just your minds, but your preconceptions about what it means to study life forms. A ripple of movement passed through the audience. A Valerian student near the front raised an appendage, their translucent skin revealing accelerated neural activity. Professor, we reviewed your credentials. Humans have only achieved interstellar travel within the last century. How can your species' understanding of xenobiology compare to civilizations that have studied it for millennia? Sarah activated the containment field around her demonstration area. An excellent question. Tell me, how many of you have ever touched a living specimen during your studies? The silence was telling. Theory is essential, but life, real life, is messy, unpredictable, and impossible to fully understand through simulations alone. She reached into a secure container beside her podium and withdrew a sealed terrarium. Inside, a creature that resembled a cross between an Earth octopus and a Venus flytrap moved with deliberate grace. Several students in the front row instinctively recoiled. This is a juvenile Proximan neurivore, Sarah explained, placing the terrarium on her desk. Completely harmless at this stage, but in 6 months, it will develop the ability to feed on neural energy. Traditional teaching would have you study it through force field barriers. Today, we're going to observe its early development patterns through direct interaction. The dean, still watching from the doorway, shifted uncomfortably as Sarah began deactivating the terrarium's outer containment field. A Meridian student actually crystallized in shock, their species equivalent of fainting. Professor, called out a Regellian student, their voice modulator barely masking their anxiety. Surely direct contact with a neurivore violates at least 17 safety protocols? Sarah smiled as she finished her safety checks. Actually, it violates 23. But each of those protocols was written from a perspective of fear. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our intelligence. It's our ability to understand that fear doesn't need to prevent discovery. Now, who would like to observe the specimen's early feeding response patterns? The silence that followed was broken by a single Arcturian student floating down to the demonstration area, their tendrils glowing with curiosity rather than anxiety. As Sarah guided them through proper handling procedures, she noticed other students leaning forward in their seats, fear giving way to fascination. This, she thought, was how barriers began to break down, not through grand gestures or diplomatic treaties, but through shared curiosity and the willingness to reach out and touch the unknown. By the end of her first hour, 7 students had successfully handled the neurovore, and the dean's colors had shifted from concerned orange to intrigued purple. As the class concluded, Sarah heard snippets of excited conversation in various languages and dialects. The Valerian who had questioned her credentials approached the podium, their neural patterns showing intense activity. "Professor Chin," they began, "I have studied proximal neurovores for 3 cycles, but I never understood their early development until today. How did you know it was safe to handle them?" "Because someone had to be the first to try," Sarah replied, carefully returning the specimen to its containment unit. Humans have a saying, knowledge isn't just power, it's the courage to reach out and touch what others fear. Remember that for next class. We'll be studying Jovian plasma eels. The dean's colors shifted rapidly through several spectrums of alarm, but Sarah pretended not to notice. One step at a time, she would show them that humanity's approach to science, while different, had value. As she watched her students file out, their bodies and appendages animated with excitement, she knew she had taken the first step toward changing not just how xenobiology was taught, but how humans were perceived in the galactic academic community. The real challenge would begin next week, when theory gave way to practice, and her students would learn that sometimes the most dangerous specimen in the room was the one teaching the class. News of Dr. Chen's unorthodox first lecture spread through the Galactic Academy's crystalline halls faster than a quantum transmission. By her second week, her lecture hall was filled beyond capacity, with students from other departments crowding the doorway, their various sensory organs straining to catch a glimpse of the human professor who dared to handle dangerous specimens. The faculty lounge buzzed with concerned discussion. Professor Zyxtal, a gaseous being contained within an ornate environmental field, drifted closer to Dean Xthrill. This human's methods are causing disruption across multiple departments. Yesterday, a group of my quantum physics students asked why they couldn't conduct practical experiments with unstable matter. Precisely my concern, added Professor Mrith, her crystalline form vibrating with agitation. She's encouraging unnecessary risk-taking. These teaching methods may work for humans, but our students come from carefully evolved societies where direct interaction with dangerous elements has been engineered out of necessity. Sarah Chin, standing in the doorway, cleared her throat. The faculty members turned, some changing colors in embarrassment, others merely vibrating at different frequencies. "Colleagues," she said, stepping into the room, "I understand your concerns. But consider this. Every species represented in this academy evolved from creatures that had to interact directly with their environment to survive. We haven't removed that capacity from our students, we've merely convinced them they don't need it." Before anyone could respond, her comm unit chimed. "Excuse me," she said, checking the message. "My Jovian plasma eel has just arrived for today's demonstration." The faculty lounge erupted in alarmed chatter as she left. Dean Xthrill's exoskeleton shifted through 7 different warning colors before settling on a deep purple of resignation. In Lecture Hall 7, Sarah's students waited with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The containment tank at the front of the room glowed with an ethereal blue light, within which a serpentine form moved with liquid grace. The Jovian plasma eel, nearly 2 meters long, crackled with bioelectrical energy. Today, Sarah announced, we're going to learn why Jovian plasma eels are crucial to understanding bioelectrical evolution in gas giant ecosystems. And yes, she smiled at the nervous murmurs, we will be conducting a hands-on demonstration. A Meridian student's crystalline form flickered anxiously. Professor, our species conducts electricity. Won't direct contact be fatal? Excellent observation, Sarah replied, activating her suit's protective field. Which is precisely why you'll be observing from behind a class for barrier. Different species, different precautions. This is why practical experience is so valuable. It teaches us not just theory, but our own limitations and advantages. She approached the tank, her movements deliberate and confident. The key to handling any dangerous species is understanding their behavior patterns. Plasma eels don't attack out of aggression. They react to electrical signatures they perceive as threatening. The class watched in fascination as she adjusted her suit's field to match the eel's natural frequency. The creature responded immediately, moving closer to the tank wall near her hand. Several students leaned forward, their various sensory organs focused intently on the demonstration. Notice how it responds to synchronized electrical patterns, Sarah continued. This is why traditional study through force fields has limited our understanding. The barriers we use for safety actually interfere with the very behaviors we're trying to observe. An Arcturian student raised their luminescent tentacles. But Professor, surely the risk outweighs the potential knowledge gain? Our historical records show that direct interaction with dangerous species has a 47% mortality rate. Sarah smiled. Those statistics come from accidental encounters or poorly planned experiments. Humanity has learned that controlled risk, backed by proper understanding and preparation, can reduce that rate to less than 0.1%. Now, who would like to try synchronizing with our friend here? To everyone's surprise, the Meridian student who had initially expressed concern floated forward. I would like to try. My species' crystalline structure can be adjusted to match electrical frequencies. Excellent. Sarah helped the student modify their natural conductivity while maintaining safety protocols. The rest of the class watched in amazement as the plasma eel responded to the student's carefully modulated electrical signature, performing a graceful dance of bioluminescence. As the demonstration continued, more students volunteered, each discovering how their unique physiologies could interact safely with the specimen. Even the gaseous beings, usually the most reluctant to participate in physical demonstrations, found ways to observe the eel's electrical patterns through carefully controlled atmospheric interactions. Near the end of the class, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Dean's Thrill stood watching, their compound eyes reflecting the spectacular light show created by the interaction between students and specimen. For the first time, their exoskeleton showed colors of curiosity rather than concern. Sarah noticed several faculty members gathering behind the dean, their earlier skepticism giving way to reluctant interest. Professor Zyxdal's gaseous form swirled with patterns that indicated deep thought. As the students filed out, chattering excitedly about their experiences, Sarah carefully returned the plasma eel to its secure containment unit. She turned to find Dean's Thrill approaching her podium. Professor Chin, they chittered, mandibles moving in a pattern she hadn't seen before. While your methods remain concerning, I cannot deny the level of engagement and understanding your students are displaying. Perhaps there is something to this human approach to education. Sarah nodded, hiding her satisfaction. Thank you, Dean. Next week's lesson involves quantum phase spiders. Would you like to observe? I understand your species has a particular affinity for temporal manipulation. The dean's colors shifted rapidly between alarm and intrigue before settling on a shade she recognized as academic curiosity. Sometimes, she reflected, the hardest specimens to handle weren't the dangerous ones in tanks, but the preconceptions locked away in minds. And just like any other specimen, with the right approach, even the most rigid academic traditions could be carefully coaxed into evolution. 3 weeks into the semester, Dr. Sarah Chen's reputation at the Galactic Academy had evolved from concerning anomaly to controversial pioneer. Her classes were now broadcast across multiple lecture halls to accommodate the overflow of students eager to witness her practical demonstrations. Even some faculty members had begun quietly incorporating elements of her hands-on approach into their own teaching methods. Today's specimen was particularly challenging, a mature shadow hunter from the dark side of Proxima b, a predator evolved to hunt through dimensional phases. The creature resided in a specially designed quantum containment field at the front of the lecture hall, its form shifting between visible reality and something else entirely. The Shadow Hunter, Sarah explained to her captivated audience, represents one of the most fascinating evolutionary adaptations we've encountered. Its ability to exist partially out of phase with our reality makes it both an apex predator and a subject of quantum biological study. The creature rippled in its containment field, its form resembling liquid darkness given shape. Multiple eyes, arranged in patterns that seemed to defy Euclidean geometry, tracked movement throughout the room. Several students instinctively shifted away, their various biological warning systems triggering in response to the predator's presence. Traditional study methods have failed to fully understand these creatures because observation changes their quantum state. Today, we'll be using a new approach I've developed that allows us to. Sarah stopped mid-sentence, frowning at the containment field's control panel. Something wasn't right. A soft alarm began to pulse, its tone designed to avoid triggering prey responses in sensitive species. The Shadow Hunter's form became more solid, more present, as quantum fluctuations rippled across the containment field. "Professor," called out a Valerian student, their neural patterns flashing warning colors. "The field harmonics are destabilizing." Sarah moved quickly to the control panel, her fingers dancing across the interface. "Class, please maintain calm and proceed to the emergency." The containment field collapsed with a sound like reality tearing, plunging the lecture hall into absolute darkness. Chaos erupted. Students of various species scrambled for the exits, some floating, others running, a few simply phasing through walls in panic. In the darkness, something moved with predatory grace, its multiple eyes now fully visible and hunting. "Everyone stop." Sarah's voice cut through the panic. "Your movement is attracting it." Shadowhunters track quantum disturbances caused by rapid motion. The darkness seemed to deepen as the creature circled the room, testing, hunting. A Meridian student had crystallized in terror, their form creating prismatic patterns in the darkness. The Shadowhunter noticed, its many eyes focusing on the play of light. It moved with liquid speed toward the helpless student. Sarah's voice remained steady, authoritative. "Maintain absolute stillness." These creatures evolved in quantum darkness. They're confused by consistent light patterns. She reached slowly into her pocket and withdrew a small device. The Shadowhunter was mere meters from the crystallized student when Sarah activated her quantum lure, a device she developed specifically for this class, but never expected to use in an emergency. It projected a complex pattern of light and quantum fluctuations that mimicked the creature's natural prey. The predator paused, its attention drawn to the lure. Sarah began moving slowly, deliberately, using her understanding of the creature's hunting patterns to draw it away from the students. The darkness in the room seemed to flow with her movement. "Dean's thrill," she called out softly, noting the administrator's presence near the door. "Execute emergency protocol Alpha 7. Now." The dean's compound eyes reflected understanding as they activated a sequence of commands on their personal interface. Gradually, specific light panels in the lecture hall began to activate, creating a carefully choreographed pattern of illumination that herded the Shadowhunter toward a secondary containment area. Students watched in stunned silence as their human professor practically danced with the interdimensional predator, each movement precisely calculated to avoid triggering its hunting responses while guiding it exactly where she wanted it to go. The Shadowhunter, confused by the complex patterns of light and quantum fluctuations, followed the path of least resistance, directly into the backup containment field. Sarah sealed it with a gesture, and the emergency lights slowly returned to full power. The lecture hall remained frozen in silence for several long moments. The Meridian student gradually decrystallized, their forms shimmering with residual fear and amazement. Other students emerged from various hiding spots or protective states. "Well," Sarah said, smoothing her slightly disheveled hair, "that was an unplanned practical demonstration of predator containment protocols. Would anyone like to analyze what just happened from a xenobiological perspective?" To everyone's surprise, hands and various appendages began to raise throughout the room. The fear was giving way to scientific curiosity, just as Sarah had hoped. Even Dean's Thrill's exoskeleton had shifted to a color she'd never seen before, something between respect and astonishment. Professor Chin, the dean chittered, mandibles moving in an unusual pattern. I believe we need to discuss updating our emergency protocols. Your handling of this situation was unprecedented. Sarah nodded, already making notes on her tablet. Agreed. And students, I expect a full analysis of the Shadowhunter's behavioral patterns during the containment breach in your next reports. Nothing teaches us more about a species than observing its natural hunting behaviors, even when those observations are unplanned. As the adrenaline of the incident faded, Sarah noticed something remarkable. Not a single student had left the lecture hall. If anything, they seemed more engaged than ever, their various sensory organs fixed on the now safely contained Shadowhunter with renewed interest. Sometimes, she reflected, the most effective lessons were the ones you never planned to teach. And sometimes, it took a brush with danger to prove that knowledge and understanding were the best defenses against fear. The emergency faculty meeting following the Shadowhunter incident packed the grand conference chamber to capacity. Beings of all species filled the tiered seating, their murmurs, clicks, and vibrations creating a symphony of concern. Dr. Sarah Chin sat calmly at the center of the storm, her data pad filled with notes from the incident. Dean's Thrill addressed the assembled faculty, their exoskeleton shifting through careful diplomatic colors. The containment breach has raised serious questions about our safety protocols. However, they paused, compound eyes focusing on Sarah. It has also demonstrated something unprecedented in our institution's history. Professor Zyxdal's gaseous form swirled agitatedly. Yes, the complete failure of safety measures. We cannot risk. With respect, Sarah interrupted, rising from her seat. What it demonstrated was the difference between theoretical and practical knowledge. Every safety protocol in our database assumes evacuation is the only response to containment failure. But some species, like the Shadowhunter, make evacuation the deadliest possible choice. She activated a holographic display, showing the incident from multiple angles. The assembled faculty watched in silence as the recording displayed her careful manipulation of the predator using light and quantum patterns. Notice how the creature responds to movement patterns, Sarah explained. Traditional protocols would have caused mass casualties. Instead, we had 0 injuries because we understood and adapted to the specimen's actual behavior patterns. A crystalline professor Sarah hadn't met before chimed in, their form resonating with curiosity. Your response seemed practiced, as if you had anticipated such a failure. Sarah smiled. I prepare for every possibility when handling dangerous specimens. Each demonstration has multiple backup protocols, most of which I developed based on actual behavioral studies rather than theoretical models. She brought up another display, showing detailed safety protocols she'd developed for each species in her teaching collection. The thoroughness of her preparation was evident in every diagram, every contingency plan. What you call reckless, she continued, we humans call proper preparation. Yes, we take risks, but never without understanding and planning for the consequences. Dean's Thrill's colors shifted to a thoughtful shade. Professor Chen's methods, while unconventional, saved lives yesterday. Perhaps it's time we reevaluated our approach to practical xenobiology. The chamber erupted in discussion. Sarah noticed several younger faculty members nodding in agreement, their various appendages and sensory organs showing signs of excitement rather than fear. There's more, Sarah added, bringing up new data. The containment breach provided unprecedented data about Shadowhunter hunting behaviors. We learned more in those few minutes than in decades of observation through barriers. She displayed complex charts showing the creature's quantum phase patterns during the incident. These readings suggest their dimensional shifting isn't just a hunting technique, it's a fundamental part of their biology we've never understood because we were too afraid to observe them up close. A Valerian professor's neural patterns pulsed with sudden understanding. The phase patterns, they're not random. They're communicating through quantum fluctuations. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. What we thought was just a predatory adaptation is actually a sophisticated form of social behavior. We never saw it before because our containment methods were interfering with the very things we were trying to study. The faculty's resistance began to crack as scientific curiosity overcame institutional caution. Questions flew from all corners of the chamber, not about safety protocols, but about the implications of her discoveries. This, Sarah gestured to the eager discussion around them, is why humanity's approach to science differs from the galactic standard. We understand that real discovery requires controlled risk-taking. Yes, something went wrong yesterday, but we were prepared, we adapted, and we learned from it. Dean's Thrill raised their appendages for silence. Professor Chen has submitted a proposal to establish a new department, Practical Xenobiology and Safety Protocols. This department would develop new standards for hands-on research and education, combining human adaptability with our existing safety measures. The announcement caused another wave of discussion, but this time the tone was different. Faculty members were already forming research groups, discussing potential collaborations, imagining the possibilities of this new approach. Sarah watched with satisfaction as the academic community she joined began to evolve before her eyes. The Shadowhunter incident, rather than ending her teaching career, had cracked open a door that had been sealed for generations. A young Arcturian professor floated over to her, their bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with excitement. Professor Chen, would you consider co-teaching a course on adaptive research methods? My students have been asking. As Sarah began discussing potential collaboration, she caught Dean's Thrill's eye across the chamber. The Dean's exoskeleton had settled into a new color she'd never seen before, one that seemed to combine the shades of progress, hope, and discovery. Sometimes, she reflected, it took a moment of crisis to break through centuries of established thinking. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing in any academic institution wasn't the specimens in containment, but the fear of change itself. A month after the Shadowhunter incident, the Galactic Academy of Sciences had undergone a subtle but profound transformation. The once sterile corridors now housed secure specimen observation areas where students could safely study living creatures up close. Dr. Sarah Chen's influence had spread far beyond her own classroom, creating ripples throughout the entire institution. Today, she stood in the newly established Practical Research Center, watching as students from diverse species worked together at specially designed safety stations. Each station combined traditional containment technology with new interfaces that allowed for controlled interaction with specimens. Remarkable progress, Professor Chen, came a familiar chittering voice. Dean's Thrill approached, their exoskeleton displaying pleased colors. The Council of Academic Excellence has requested our safety protocols. It seems your methods are attracting attention across the galaxy. Sarah nodded, observing a group of students carefully documenting the behavior of a juvenile crystal WRM. The key was helping everyone understand that safety doesn't mean isolation. Real understanding requires controlled interaction. A Meridian student called out excitedly, their crystalline form vibrating with discovery. Professor, we've documented a previously unknown harmonic pattern in the WRM's growth structure. It's only visible when observed through direct crystalline resonance. You see, Sarah turned to the dean. That's something they never could have discovered through traditional observation methods. Sometimes you need to get close enough to resonate with your subject. Around them, the research center hummed with activity. A group of gaseous students were learning to modulate their molecular structure to safely study plasma-based life forms. Arcturian researchers floated near the ceiling, their bioluminescent tendrils synchronized with deep-sea specimens from Europa. Professor Ziwextal, once her strongest critic, had become an unexpected ally. Their gaseous form swirled with purpose as they guided students through complex atmospheric interaction experiments. The human approach, they had admitted recently, adds a dimension to our understanding that we had forgotten was possible. Sarah's attention was drawn to a commotion near the advanced studies section. A team of mixed-species researchers had just achieved something unprecedented, successful communication with a colony of quantum hive minds through direct neural interface. We did it, called out a Valerian student, their neural patterns flashing with joy. The hive accepted our signal pattern. They're inviting us to join their collective consciousness simulation. Such breakthroughs were becoming common as students and faculty embraced the combination of careful preparation and controlled risk-taking. The fear that had dominated xenobiological research for centuries was giving way to excited discovery. Professor, Dean's thrill's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Academy Board has made a decision. We want to establish a permanent exchange program with Earth's universities. Your success has shown us that there may be other, unique perspectives we've been missing. Sarah smiled, remembering her first day and the skepticism she'd faced. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or even our adaptability, she said. It's our ability to look at danger and see opportunity, to face the unknown and choose to learn rather than retreat. A sudden hush fell over the research center as the lights dimmed slightly. In the central containment area, a newly arrived specimen was being installed, an adult void whale, its massive form existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humans were only beginning to understand. Students gathered around the enormous observation chamber, their various sensory organs focused on the magnificent creature. But unlike a few months ago, there was no fear in their postures or energy patterns, only curiosity and excitement. Begin acclimation protocols, Sarah instructed, stepping forward. Remember, void whales respond to conscious thought patterns. Everyone maintain calm, open minds. We're not just observers anymore, we're participants in a dialogue with the universe. As the massive creature began to respond to their carefully projected thoughts, Sarah caught glimpses of understanding dawning across species barriers. A Meridian student's crystalline form resonated in harmony with the void whale's dimensional frequencies. An Arcturian researcher's bioluminescence synchronized with its neural patterns. This, she said softly to Dean's thrill, is what education should be. Not just the transfer of knowledge, but the breaking down of barriers between different ways of understanding the universe. The Dean's colors shifted through shades she'd never seen before, settling on something that seemed to represent evolution itself. Perhaps, they chittered, this is why humanity has advanced so quickly. You never learned to fear the unknown because you were too busy trying to understand it. Around them, the research center had become a living testament to that philosophy. Students who once would have hidden behind force fields were now engaged in careful, controlled interaction with specimens that their textbooks had labeled too dangerous to approach. The change wasn't just in the methodology, it was in the very spirit of the institution. The Galactic Academy was remembering something it had forgotten over millennia of cautious observation, that true science required not just observation, but engagement. Not just theory, but practice. Not just knowledge, but understanding. And in that moment, watching her students make breakthrough after breakthrough, Sarah knew she had achieved something far more important than just teaching xenobiology. She had helped an entire institution remember how to be curious again. 1 year after Dr. Sarah Chen first walked through the crystalline doors of the Galactic Academy of Sciences, she stood on the main stage of the Grand Assembly Hall, addressing the largest gathering of xenobiologists in galactic history. Representatives from every major scientific institution in known space had come to witness the graduation of the Academy's first class of practical xenobiology students. The hall itself had been modified to accommodate the event. Traditional force field barriers had been replaced with new adaptive containment systems, allowing controlled interaction between different species. Even the most dangerous graduates could attend safely, including a group of phase-shift entities who flickered in and out of normal spacetime. When I first arrived here, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the universal translators, I was told that humanity's approach to science was too risky, too unpredictable. Today, we celebrate not just the graduation of these students, but the birth of a new era in galactic scientific understanding. Behind her, a massive holoscreen displayed images from the past year, students handling specimens that had once been considered too dangerous to approach, breakthrough discoveries made possible only through direct observation, and countless moments of interspecies cooperation that had once seemed impossible. These graduates, she continued, gesturing to the assembled students, represent more than just the success of a new teaching method. They represent the triumph of curiosity over fear, of understanding over isolation, and of practical knowledge over theoretical limitation. A Valerian student floated forward, their neural patterns glowing with pride as they presented their final project. A revolutionary new understanding of quantum predator psychology that had already led to improved containment systems across the galaxy. Furthermore, Sarah announced, "I am pleased to share that the Council of Galactic Universities has officially adopted our new safety protocols and practical research methodologies. Starting next cycle, every major xenobiology institution will incorporate hands-on learning alongside traditional theory." The announcement caused a wave of excited chatter throughout the hall. Dean's Thrill, their exoskeleton now permanently displaying the colors of progress, stepped forward to add their own news. "The Academy is proud to announce the establishment of the Human Perspective Initiative," they chittered. "This program will bring educators from Earth to institutions across the galaxy, while sending our own faculty to learn from humanity's unique approach to scientific discovery." In the audience, Sarah noticed several of her former critics nodding in approval. Professor Zyxdal's gaseous form swirled with patterns of satisfaction. They had already signed up to teach at Harvard's new xenobiology department. "But perhaps our greatest achievement," Sarah continued, "isn't in our new methods or protocols. It's in what we've learned about ourselves. Every species here evolved from creatures that had to interact with their environment to survive. We haven't lost that ability, we've simply forgotten how to use it safely." She gestured to a secure containment field at the side of the stage, where the same Shadowhunter from the infamous incident now resided. But instead of fear, its presence generated interest. Students had learned to understand and respect such creatures, rather than simply fear them. "This year has taught us that the greatest barrier to scientific progress isn't the danger of what we study, it's the limitation we place on our own potential. Humanity didn't advance quickly because we were fearless. We advanced because we learned to transform our fear into careful preparation and methodical study." As if to emphasize her point, a group of students demonstrated their final project, a new method of communicating with plasma-based life forms that combined traditional safety measures with direct energy interaction. The display lit up the hall with beautiful patterns of controlled plasma discharge. "Looking out at all of you today," Sarah's voice filled with emotion, "I see not just the future of xenobiology, but the future of galactic science itself. A future where different species don't just study together, they learn from each other's perspectives and abilities." The ceremony concluded with something unprecedented, a practical demonstration involving every graduating student. Working together, they created a living display of interspecies cooperation, each using their unique biological abilities to interact safely with different specimens. As the applause and various other species' expressions of approval filled the hall, Sarah caught sight of a new group of human professors being welcomed by faculty members. The barriers weren't just breaking in xenobiology. Every department was beginning to see the value of combining human practical approaches with galactic theoretical knowledge. Dean's Thrill approached her after the ceremony, their mandibles clicking in what she now recognized as their species' version of a smile. "Professor Chin, when you first arrived, I thought you would either revolutionize our institution or destroy it. I never considered you might do both, and that the destruction of our old limitations would lead to something far better." Sarah watched as her graduates mingled with representatives from research institutions across the galaxy, many already recruited for groundbreaking new projects. "Sometimes," she replied, "you have to be willing to break down old walls to build something new." Humanity learned that lesson through millennia of trial and error. We just helped the galaxy learn it a bit faster. As the celebration continued, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. The Galactic Academy had transformed from a place of cautious observation to a living laboratory of practical discovery. But more importantly, it had become a place where different species learn not just to coexist, but to combine their unique perspectives in the pursuit of knowledge. The future of galactic science would be built not on fear of the unknown, but on the careful, controlled exploration of it. And in that future, humanity's greatest contribution wouldn't be our technology or our methods, but our willingness to reach out and touch the universe, even when others thought it too dangerous to try.